In the heart of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where rolling green hills stretch endlessly and horse-drawn buggies still clip-clop down dusty roads, lives 62-year-old Samuel Yoder. For 30 years, Samuel has carried a burden heavier than any harvest, the loss of his only son, Jacob, who died in a barn fire at age 8. His wife, Mary, passed away from grief 3 years later, leaving Samuel to tend their farm alone, his heart as barren as winter fields. But sometimes, when we least expect it, God places exactly what we need right in our path. On a cold October evening, as Samuel walks his property line checking fences, he discovers something that will change both their lives forever. A frightened, half-frozen 7-year-old boy named Tommy, running from a world that has forgotten how to love him. This is a story about two souls who have lost everything, finding in each other the family they never knew they were searching for. Picture this scene with me. It's October 15th, 23, and the sun is setting over Lancaster County like God himself is painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. The air carries that crisp bite of autumn, and somewhere in the distance you can hear the gentle lowing of cattle settling in for the night. This is Amish country, where life moves at the pace of horse hooves and the rhythm of seasons that have remained unchanged for centuries. Samuel Yoder walks slowly along his fence line, his weathered hands running over wooden posts he's repaired 1,000 times. At 62, Samuel's beard has gone completely silver white, and his blue eyes hold the kind of deep sadness that comes from losing everything that matters. His black wool coat flaps in the evening breeze as he moves with the careful, measured steps of a man who's learned that life can change in an instant. You see, Samuel wasn't always alone. 30 years ago, this 150-acre farm bustled with life. His wife Mary's laughter would ring out from the kitchen windows, mixing with the sound of their 8-year-old son Jacob's excited chatter as he helped with evening chores. Jacob had his mother's warm brown eyes and his father's stubborn determination, and he could make Samuel smile just by running toward him with arms outstretched. But on a November night in 1993, a lantern tipped over in the barn. The fire spread so fast that by the time Samuel reached Jacob, the boy was already gone, taken by the smoke before the flames could touch him. Samuel carried his son's lifeless body out of that burning barn, and something inside him died that night too. Mary tried to hold them together, tried to convince Samuel that God had a plan, but the grief consumed her like a slow-burning fire of its own. 3 years later, she simply stopped eating, stopped speaking, and quietly slipped away in her sleep. For 27 years since then, Samuel has worked this farm alone. He tends his horses, grows his crops, participates in barn raisings and community gatherings, but he's never truly been present. He goes through the motions of living, while his heart remains frozen in that terrible November night when everything he loved turned to ash. But tonight, something's different. As Samuel reaches the far corner of his property where his land borders the old highway, he hears something that stops him cold, the sound of quiet sobbing coming from the tall grass near his fence line. Samuel stands perfectly still, listening. At first he thinks it might be an injured animal, but then he hears it clearly, a child's voice, small and broken, whimpering in the darkness. Every instinct tells him to approach carefully. Children don't end up alone on Amish farmland at dusk unless something has gone terribly wrong. He pushes through the tall grass, following the sound, and there, huddled against his fence post like a lost lamb, is a little boy. The child can't be more than 7 years old, wearing jeans that are too big for his thin frame and a torn Spider-Man t-shirt that provides no protection against the cold. His dark hair is matted with dirt and tears, and his small body shakes with exhaustion and fear. "Hey there, little one," Samuel says softly in his gentle Pennsylvania Dutch accent, keeping his distance so he won't frighten the child further. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The boy looks up with the largest, most frightened brown eyes Samuel has ever seen. For a moment, those eyes remind him so powerfully of Jacob that his breath catches in his throat. The resemblance isn't exact, This child's features are different, but something about the shape of his face, the way he holds his head, sends Samuel's heart racing with a mixture of pain and something else he can't quite identify. "Please don't send me back," the boy whispers, his voice barely audible above the evening wind. "I can't go back there. I can't." Samuel's heart breaks at the terror in those words. He's seen fear before, in the eyes of injured animals, in his wife's face during her final days. But this is different. This is the raw, desperate fear of a child who has learned that the people meant to protect him are the ones he needs protection from. "I'm not going to send you anywhere you don't want to go," Samuel says, slowly lowering himself to the ground so he's at the boy's eye level. "My name is Samuel. What's yours?" The child hesitates, clearly debating whether to trust this strange man with the gentle voice and kind eye. Finally, he whispers, Tommy Henderson." "Well, Tommy Henderson, you look mighty cold and hungry. How about we get you warmed up and fed, and then we can figure out what's best for you. No one's going to hurt you here. I give you my word." Tommy studies Samuel's face for a long moment, and something passes between them, a recognition, perhaps, of one wounded soul meeting another. Slowly the boy nods. Samuel stands carefully and extends his hand. "Come on then, Tommy. Let's get you inside where it's warm." As they walk toward the farmhouse, Tommy's small hand tucked securely in Samuel's calloused palm, neither of them realizes that this moment, this first meeting in the tall grass, will become the turning point both their lives have been waiting for. Behind them, the last light of day fades from the sky, but ahead, warm yellow light glows in the farmhouse windows, promising safety, comfort, and perhaps something even more precious, hope. Samuel glances down at the boy walking beside him, noting how Tommy tries to match his stride despite his much shorter legs, and feels something stir in his chest that he hasn't felt in decades. It's faint, like the first green shoots pushing through winter soil, but it's there, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, his heart might learn to beat fully again. Neither Samuel nor Tommy speaks as they approach the house, but both understand instinctively that whatever happens next will change everything. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives arrive quietly, disguised as simple acts of kindness between strangers. And sometimes, when we open our hearts to help someone else heal, we discover that we're healing ourselves. The farmhouse door swings open with a creak that seems to welcome them both home. Now let me tell you what happens when Samuel brings Tommy inside that old farmhouse, a house that hasn't heard a child's voice in 30 years. The moment they step through the door, you can feel the weight of decades of silence pressing down on them like a heavy quilt. The kitchen is exactly what you'd expect in an Amish home. Simple wooden table, hand-carved chairs, no electricity, just the warm glow of kerosene lamps, casting dancing shadows on plain white walls. But there's something missing here, something you notice immediately. There are no signs of life beyond Samuel's basic needs, no extra plates in the dish rack, no second coffee cup by the sink. This is the home of a man who's been merely surviving, not living. Tommy stands just inside the doorway, still trembling, his wide eyes taking in everything. The wood-burning stove, the hand-pumped water well, the complete absence of anything electric. To a 7-year-old from the modern world, this must feel like stepping back in time. "Have you ever seen a house without lights you flip on?" Samuel asks gently, noticing Tommy's confusion. Tommy shakes his head, still too scared to speak much, but there's curiosity mixing with his fear now. Samuel lights another kerosene lamp, and Tommy's eyes follow the flame with the wonder only children possess. "We live simple here," Samuel explains, hanging his black coat on a wooden peg by the door. "No electricity, no television, no cars, just us and the land and God's grace." He pauses, studying Tommy's thin frame and the way the boy's clothes hang loose on his small body. "When did you last eat, son?" At the word son, something flickers across Tommy's face, a mixture of longing and fear, as if he's not sure whether to trust such kindness or run from it. "Yesterday, I think," Tommy whispers. Maybe the day before. I'm not sure." Samuel's jaw tightens slightly, not with anger at the boy, but with a righteous fury at whoever has allowed a child to go hungry. Without another word, he moves to his simple kitchen, pulling out ingredients for what his Mary used to call comfort soup. Chicken broth with homemade noodles, carrots from his garden, and herbs that fill the entire house with the smell of home. As Samuel cooks, Tommy remains frozen by the door, as if he's ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. But slowly, gradually, the warmth of the kitchen and the gentle sounds of Samuel preparing food begin to work their magic. Tommy takes one step forward, then another, until he's close enough to the stove to feel its heat. "You can sit down, Tommy," Samuel says without turning around. "That chair there by the table, that's a good spot where you can warm up properly." Tommy climbs onto the wooden chair, his feet dangling several inches from the floor. He watches Samuel's every movement with the intensity of a child who has learned to read adult moods for his own survival. But Samuel moves with calm, deliberate gentleness, never making sudden movements, never raising his voice. "Tell me about where you came from," Samuel says as he stirs the soup. "Not if you don't want to, but sometimes talking helps carry the burden." Tommy is quiet for so long that Samuel thinks he won't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the words begin to tumble out. "My mom, she died when I was 5. Cancer." Tommy's small hands twist together in his lap. "I lived with my Uncle Rick and Aunt Linda after that, but Uncle Rick, he gets really mad. Really, really mad. And when he drinks the brown bottles, he gets meaner." Samuel's stirring slows, but he doesn't turn around. He understands that Tommy needs to tell this story to the back of a safe person, not to a face that might judge or pity him. "He said I was just another mouth to feed, and mouths that don't earn their keep don't deserve to eat, so I had to do chores, lots of chores, and if I did them wrong..." Tommy's voice trails off. "Did he hurt you, son?" Samuel asks quietly. The silence stretches so long that Samuel finally does turn around. Tommy has pulled his knees up to his chest in the chair, making himself as small as possible, and there are fresh tears sliding down his cheeks. "He said if I ever told anyone, he'd find me and make me sorry. He said nobody would believe me anyway because I'm just a stupid kid whose own parents didn't want him." Samuel sets down his wooden spoon and walks slowly over to Tommy's chair. Very carefully, he kneels down beside it, bringing himself to eye level with the frightened boy. "Tommy, look at me," Samuel says gently. When Tommy's tear-filled eyes meet his, Samuel continues, "Your uncle lied to you. Your parents didn't leave you because they didn't want you. Death isn't a choice people make to get away from their children. Your mama loved you, and she would have stayed if she could have." "How do you know?" Tommy whispers. "Because," Samuel says, and his voice carries the weight of his own grief. "I lost my little boy too. His name was Jacob, and he was 8 years old when God called him home. Not a day has passed in 30 years that I haven't wished I could have gone with him, or that he could have stayed with me. That's what real love looks like, Tommy. It doesn't leave by choice." Something profound happens in that moment. Tommy stares into Samuel's eyes and sees not just kindness, but understanding. Here is a man who knows what it means to lose someone precious, who understands that love doesn't disappear when someone dies. "Will you tell me about Jacob?" Tommy asks, his voice still small but no longer quite so frightened. And so, as the soup simmers and the evening deepens outside, Samuel does something he hasn't done in 30 years. He tells Tommy about Jacob's laugh, about how the boy loved to help with the horses, about how he could make his mother smile even on her hardest days. He talks until the soup is ready, and then he continues talking as they eat together at that simple wooden table. Tommy listens to every word, asking occasional questions about life on an Amish farm, about horses and crops and barn raisings. For the first time since his mother died, he feels safe enough to be curious about the world around him. "Samuel," Tommy says as he finishes his second bowl of soup, "why don't you have any kids now? I mean, besides Jacob, who went to heaven." It's an innocent question, but it hits Samuel like a physical blow. He sets down his spoon and looks across the table at this small boy, who somehow feels like an answer to a prayer he was afraid to pray. "Well, Samuel says slowly. After Jacob died, my wife Mary got so sad that she died too, but from sadness instead of sickness. And I guess I forgot how to hope for a family again. Tommy considers this with the seriousness only children can bring to important matters. Then he says something that stops Samuel's heart. Maybe you forgot because you were waiting. Maybe God was keeping you ready for when someone really needed a dad. Someone like me. The words hang in the air between them like a bridge, neither of them expected to find. Samuel stares at this wise, wounded little boy and feels something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, but opening like ice breaking up in spring to let the river flow again. Maybe he was, Samuel whispers, and for the first time in 30 years, he allows himself to believe it might be true. As the evening grows later, Samuel realizes that Tommy needs somewhere to sleep. The boy's exhaustion is evident in the way he keeps blinking slowly, fighting to stay awake as if sleep might take away this newfound safety. "Come on, Tommy," Samuel says gently. "Let's get you settled for the night." He leads Tommy upstairs to a small room that has remained untouched for decades. Jacob's room. Samuel's hand trembles slightly as he opens the door, revealing a simple space with a single bed, a wooden dresser, and toys that have waited 30 years for small hands to hold them again. Tommy steps inside and immediately notices something that makes his breath catch. On the dresser sits a carved wooden horse, painted brown with a black mane, and next to it a collection of small farm animals whittled from wood. "Jacob made those," Samuel says softly. "He was good with his hands, always carving little animals from scraps of wood I'd give him." Tommy reaches out tentatively, then pulls his hand back. Can I touch them?" "Of course you can." "Jacob would have wanted someone to play with his toys," says Tommy, carefully picks up the wooden horse. Samuel finds one of his own old nightshirts and helps the boy change out of his dirty clothes. The nightshirt swallows Tommy's small frame, but it's clean and warm, and for the first time in days, Tommy feels truly safe. "Mr. Samuel," Tommy says as he climbs into Jacob's bed, still clutching the wooden horse, "will you stay until I fall asleep? I get scared in the dark sometimes." Samuel's throat tightens with emotion. "Of course I will." He settles into the old rocking chair beside the bed, the same chair where he used to read bedtime stories to Jacob. "Can you tell me more about Jacob?" Tommy asks, his eyelids already growing heavy. So Samuel tells him about Jacob's first attempt to milk a cow, about the time the boy tried to teach a chicken to fetch, about rainy days spent in the barn building cities out of hay bales. His voice grows soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby made of memory. As Tommy's breathing deepens into sleep, Samuel continues rocking, watching this small boy who has somehow brought his son's room back to life. For 30 years, this room has been a shrine to loss. Tonight, for the first time, it feels like what it was meant to be, a child's bedroom full of dreams and possibility. Samuel stays there long into the night, listening to Tommy breathe, feeling his own heart slowly beginning to thaw. Outside, the October wind continues to blow. But inside this room where his son once slept, something beautiful is being born, the fragile, precious beginning of a new kind of family. Neither of them knows what tomorrow will bring, but for tonight, they both sleep peacefully for the first time in longer than either can remember. Sometimes healing begins in the simplest ways, with a bowl of soup, a safe place to sleep, and someone who understands that love doesn't die when people do. It just waits, patient and enduring for the right moment to bloom again. Morning comes slowly to Lancaster County, creeping across the rolling hills like honey poured from heaven. Samuel wakes in the rocking chair beside Jacob's bed, his neck stiff from sleeping upright, but his heart lighter than it's been in 3 decades. The first thing he sees is Tommy, still curled up small in the big bed, clutching that wooden horse against his chest like a talisman against bad dreams. Samuel sits quietly for a moment, studying this child who has somehow wandered into his life like a lost lamb finding its way home. In the soft morning light filtering through the plain white curtains, Tommy looks even younger than his 7 years, fragile and vulnerable, but also peaceful in a way Samuel suspects the boy hasn't been for a very long time. The sound of Tommy stirring brings Samuel fully awake. The boy's eyes flutter open, and for a split second, there's panic there, the instinctive fear of a child who has learned to wake up ready to run. But then Tommy sees Samuel's gentle face, remembers the safety of the night before, and that fear melts into something Samuel hasn't seen directed at him in 30 years. Trust. "Good morning, Tommy," Samuel says softly. "How did you sleep?" Tommy sits up slowly, still holding the wooden horse. "I had a dream about horses," he says, his voice still thick with sleep. "Good horses, not scary ones. They were brown and black, and they let me pet them." Samuel's heart does something complicated in his chest. Jacob used to dream about horses too, used to wake up with stories about flying through clouds on the backs of magical steeds. "Would you like to meet some real horses today?" Samuel asks. Tommy's eyes widen. "Real ones? You have real horses? 3 of them, gentle as lambs, everyone." Samuel stands, his joints protesting after a night in the chair. "But first, let's get some breakfast in you." Growing boys need fuel for horse meeting. As they make their way downstairs, Tommy chatters with the excitement only children can muster in the morning. "What are their names? How big are they? Do they bite? Can I ride them?" The questions tumble out faster than Samuel can answer them, and he finds himself smiling, actually smiling, for the first time since Mary passed away. In the kitchen, Samuel sets about making a proper farm breakfast: eggs from his chickens, bacon from the smokehouse, biscuits with butter churned from his own cow's milk. Tommy watches everything with fascination, having never seen food prepared this way, without microwaves or electric stoves. "Mr. Samuel," Tommy says as he climbs onto his chair at the table, "how do you keep your food cold without a refrigerator?" "We have what's called a root cellar," Samuel explains, cracking eggs into a cast-iron pan. "It's a room dug into the earth, where it stays cool year-round, and we smoke our meat, preserve our vegetables, can our fruits. We've been doing it this way for hundreds of years." Tommy considers this with the seriousness of a child trying to understand a completely different world. "Is it hard to live without electricity?" Samuel pauses in his cooking, thinking about how to explain this to someone who has never known life without modern conveniences. "Different, maybe. Harder in some ways, easier in others. When you don't have television and computers and all those things, you have more time to notice the world around you. You hear the birds singing in the morning, you see every star at night, you know your neighbors better because you need each other more." As they eat breakfast together, Samuel finds himself really looking at Tommy for the first time in full daylight. The boy is thin, too thin, with dark circles under his eyes that speak of too many sleepless nights. His hands are small but marked with calluses that no 7-year-old should have, evidence of the harsh labor his uncle demanded. But there's also intelligence in those brown eyes, curiosity and resilience that have somehow survived everything he's endured. "Tommy," Samuel says carefully, setting down his coffee cup, "we need to talk about some grown-up things this morning." Tommy's fork stops halfway to his mouth, and that guarded look returns to his face. "Am I in trouble?" "No, you're not in trouble, and you're not going anywhere you don't want to go." Samuel leans forward, resting his arms on the table. "But the authorities are going to be looking for you. Your uncle will have reported you missing, and there will be police officers and social workers who want to make sure you're safe." Tommy's face goes pale. "They'll make me go back to Uncle Rick. They always make kids go back to family, even when the family hurts them. I heard kids at school talking about it." Samuel's heart breaks at the matter-of-fact way Tommy says this, at the resignation in his young voice. "What if I told you there might be another way? What if I said I'd like you to stay here, with me permanent?" Tommy stares at him with those wide brown eyes, afraid to hope. "You mean it? You'd really want me to stay forever?" "I've been alone on this farm for 27 years, Tommy. Yesterday, when I found you by that fence, I felt something I thought was dead inside me come back to life. You need a father, and I—" Samuel's voice catches slightly. "I need a son. If you're willing, if it's what you want, I'd like us to be a family." The silence stretches between them, heavy with possibility and fear and desperate hope. Then Tommy does something that nearly undoes Samuel completely. He starts to cry, not the panicked tears of the night before, but the deep, cleansing tears of a child who has finally found a safe place to let his guard down. "I want that more than anything," Tommy whispers through his tears. "But what if they won't let me? What if Uncle Rick says no? What if they think you can't take care of me because you're old and live funny?" Samuel reaches across the table and takes Tommy's small hands in his weathered ones. "Then we'll fight for each other. I'll hire lawyers, I'll talk to judges, I'll do whatever it takes. But first, we need to call the authorities and tell them you're safe. We need to be honest and open about everything." Tommy nods, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "Will you stay with me when I have to talk to them?" "Every single minute," Samuel promises. "I won't leave your side." After breakfast, Samuel walks Tommy out to meet the horses, knowing they'll both need the peace of the barn before the complicated world of social services and legal proceedings intrudes on their newfound happiness. The morning air is crisp and clean, carrying the sense of hay and annals and the rich earth of autumn. Tommy stops dead in his tracks when he sees Buttercup, Samuel's gentlest mare, a golden palomino with a white blaze down her face and eyes as kind as a grandmother's. She's standing by the fence, and when she sees Samuel approaching, she nickers softly in greeting. "She's beautiful," Tommy breathes, all his earlier chatter replaced by awe. "Want to pet her?" Samuel asks, opening the gate to the paddock. Tommy nods eagerly but hangs back as they approach the horse. Samuel demonstrates first, running his hand along Buttercup's neck while speaking to her in soft Pennsylvania Dutch. The horse responds by nuzzling his shoulder affectionately. "Now you try," Samuel says, guiding Tommy's hand to Buttercup's neck. Just like that, gentle and slow. The moment Tommy's small hand touches the horse's warm coat, something magical happens. Buttercup turns her head and breathes softly against Tommy's face, as if she's giving him a horse kiss. Tommy giggles, actually giggles, and the sound is like music. Samuel thought he'd never hear again. "She likes me." Tommy says in wonder, "Animals know a good heart when they meet one," Samuel tells him. "Buttercup can tell you're special." They spend an hour in the paddock with the horses, and Samuel watches Tommy come alive in a way he suspects the boy hasn't been allowed to be alive for years. Tommy asks to help with feeding, insists on carrying water buckets that are almost too heavy for him, and chatters endlessly about everything he notices. The way the horses' ears move to follow sounds, how their tails swish flies away, the soft huffing sounds they make when they're content. But as the sun climbs higher in the sky, Samuel knows they can't put off the inevitable any longer. They need to contact Child Protective Services and begin the process that will determine Tommy's future. "Tommy," Samuel says as they walk back toward the house, "are you ready to make that phone call?" Tommy takes a deep breath, squares his small shoulders, and nods. "If you promise not to let them take me away from here, I promise to fight for you with everything I have," Samuel says, and he means every word. As they enter the house together, both of them understand that whatever comes next will test this fragile new bond they've formed. The outside world is about to intrude on their perfect morning, bringing with it questions and complications, and people who might not understand that sometimes families aren't born, they're found, but they've already discovered something precious together. Hope. And sometimes when you have hope and someone willing to fight for you, that's enough to move mountains. Or at least enough to convince a judge that love doesn't always look the way people expect it to. The phone call that will change both their lives forever is waiting to be made. But first, Samuel takes a moment to look at Tommy. Really look at him, standing brave and determined in his kitchen, ready to fight for the chance to be loved. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not with swords or guns, but with the quiet courage of a wounded child and a grieving man who have decided to heal each other. The phone call Samuel makes that Tuesday morning changes everything, just as they both knew it would. Within 2 hours, the peaceful silence of Samuel's farm is shattered by the sound of car engines coming up his gravel driveway. "Tommy," who had been helping Samuel mend a fence post, freezes like a deer sensing danger. "It's them, isn't it?" Tommy whispers, his small hand instinctively reaching for Samuel's larger one. Samuel squeezes Tommy's hand reassuringly. "Remember what we talked about. We tell the truth, we stay together, and we trust that God has a plan for us." But as 3 vehicles pull up to the farmhouse, a police cruiser, a Child Protective Services van, and a black sedan that looks distinctly official, Samuel feels his own faith waver slightly. The modern world is about to collide with his simple Amish life in ways he's not sure he's prepared for. The first person out of the cars is Detective Maria Santos, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor. She's followed by Linda Morrison, a CPS worker, whose clipboard and stern expression immediately put both Samuel and Tommy on edge. Behind them emerges a man in an expensive suit who introduces himself as James Crawford, an attorney representing the state's interest in Tommy's welfare. "Mr. Yoder?" Detective Santos approaches first, her hand extended. "Thank you for calling this in. We've been searching for Tommy since yesterday morning." Samuel shakes her hand, noting how she glances around the farm with curiosity rather than judgment. "Tommy is safe here, and he's been well cared for. Before we begin, I want you to know that this boy has asked to stay with me, and I've agreed to it." The 3 officials exchange glances that Tommy doesn't miss. He presses closer to Samuel's side, and Samuel can feel the boys trembling through their clasped hands. "Yoder," Linda Morrison speaks up, her voice crisp and professional. "We appreciate your kindness, but Tommy is a ward of the state now. His legal guardian, Rick Henderson, has been frantic with worry. Tommy needs to be returned to his family immediately." "No." The word bursts from Tommy with such force that all the adults turn to look at him. "Please, I can't go back there. Uncle Rick hurts me. He makes me sleep in the basement, and he doesn't give me food, and he says terrible things, and—" Tommy. Linda Morrison interrupts, her tone gentler now, but still firm. "Children sometimes exaggerate when they're scared or confused. Your uncle is your family. He's agreed to counseling, and we'll be monitoring the situation closely." Samuel feels something fierce and protective surge through him. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this child didn't exaggerate the bruises on his arms or the fear in his eyes when I found him half frozen by my fence last night. He didn't exaggerate being so hungry he could barely stand." Detective Santos steps forward. "Mr. Yoder, may we speak with Tommy privately? It's standard procedure in these cases." "No," Samuel says firmly. "I promised Tommy I wouldn't leave his side, and I meant it. If you want to talk to him, I stay with him." Attorney Crawford clears his throat. "Mr. Yoder, you have no legal standing here. You're a stranger to this child, and while your intentions may be good, the law is clear. Children belong with their families unless there's concrete evidence of abuse." "Then let me show you the evidence," Tommy says quietly, and before anyone can stop him, he pulls up his t-shirt. The silence that follows is deafening. Tommy's small torso is a map of healing bruises, yellow and green marks, that tell the story of repeated violence. Across his back are thin red lines that could only have come from being struck with something flexible and cruel. Linda Morrison's clipboard slips from her hands. Detective Santos immediately pulls out her phone and begins taking photographs. Attorney Crawford's professional composure cracks just enough to show the human being underneath. "Tommy," Detective Santos says gently, kneeling down to his eye level, "can you tell me how you got these injuries?" With Samuel's hand on his shoulder, Tommy tells his story. He talks about Uncle Rick's drinking, about being locked in the basement for being ungrateful, about doing all the household chores while his aunt pretended not to see what was happening. He tells them about the night, 3 days ago, when Uncle Rick came home especially drunk and especially angry, and Tommy knew that if he didn't run, something even worse was going to happen. "I hid in the woods for 2 days, Tommy says, his voice steady despite the tears on his cheeks. "I was so cold and hungry, and I thought maybe I was going to die. But then I found Mr. Samuel, and he gave me soup and a warm bed, and he told me stories about his son Jacob, and for the first time since Mama died, I felt safe. The three officials look at each other with the weight of a decision that will determine a child's entire future. Samuel watches their faces, trying to read whether they see what he sees, not just an abused child who needs protection, but a boy who has found where he belongs. Mr. Yoder, Linda Morrison says finally, I need to ask you some questions about your ability to care for Tommy. You live alone on this farm, you're not married, and you have no experience with modern child rearing. How would you handle medical care, education, integration with other children his age? Samuel straightens to his full height. Ma'am, I raised a son for 8 years. I know how to love a child, how to keep him safe, how to teach him right from wrong. As for medical care, we have excellent doctors in our community who understand our ways. For education, our one-room schoolhouse has been turning out thoughtful, capable young people for generations. And for friends, Tommy would have every child in our church district. But what about his connection to the outside world? Attorney Crawford interjects. No television, no internet, no exposure to mainstream American culture. Don't you think that's a form of deprivation? Tommy tugs on Samuel's sleeve. When Samuel bends down, Tommy whispers something in his ear. Samuel nods and straightens up. Tommy has something to say about that. Tommy steps forward, his small chin raised with determination. I lived in the mainstream American culture, and it was Uncle Rick hitting me and Aunt Linda, pretending she didn't see, and kids at school making fun of my bruises, and teachers who were too busy to notice I was hungry. Samuel's world has horses that let me pet them, and soup that tastes like love, and a bed where I can sleep without being scared. I don't need television. I need a dad who won't hurt me. The words hang in the air like a challenge to everything the officials thought they knew about what's best for children. Detective Santos wipes her eyes discreetly. Linda Morrison stares at her fallen clipboard. Attorney Crawford loosens his tie as if it's suddenly too tight. There are procedures, Linda Morrison says weakly. Background checks, home studies, psychological evaluations. Then do them, Samuel says simply. Do whatever you need to do. But don't send this boy back to hell while you're shuffling papers. Detective Santos speaks up. Given the evidence of abuse, we can place Tommy in emergency foster care while we conduct a full investigation into Mr. Henderson and evaluate Mr. Yoder as a potential guardian. No foster care, Tommy says with surprising firmness. I want to stay here. This is my home now. Tommy's sweetie Linda Morrison tries again. Mr. Yoder isn't approved as a foster parent. There are regulations. Then approve him, Tommy interrupts. Do whatever grown-up things you have to do, but let me stay where I'm safe. Please. I'm begging you. The desperation in Tommy's voice breaks something in all three officials. They step aside and huddle together, voices low but urgent. Samuel watches them debate his future, and Tommy's, with the detached efficiency of people who make these decisions every day. Finally, Detective Santos approaches them. Here's what we can do. Tommy can stay here temporarily under emergency placement while we fast-track the approval process. But Mr. Yoder, you'll have social workers checking on Tommy regularly. And any sign that this placement isn't working, it's working, Tommy says before Samuel can respond. It's the first thing in my whole life that's working. As the officials prepare to leave, gathering their papers and making their notes, Linda Morrison pulls Samuel aside. Yoder, I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I've seen a lot of children in bad situations. But I've also seen what happens when well-meaning adults take on more than they can handle. Are you absolutely sure you're ready for children who've been abused require patience, understanding, and sometimes professional help? Samuel looks over at Tommy, who is kneeling by the fence petting Buttercup through the slats. The boy is talking to the horse in soft tones, and for a moment Samuel can see exactly what Tommy will look like when the fear finally leaves his eyes completely. Ma'am, Samuel says quietly, 30 years ago I lost everything that mattered to me. I thought God was punishing me, thought I'd never understand why he took my family away. Yesterday I found a boy by my fence who needed exactly what I had to give. A safe place, steady love, and someone who understands what it's like to lose everything. Maybe God wasn't punishing me. Maybe he was preparing me. Linda Morrison follows Samuel's gaze to Tommy and the horse. I hope you're right, Mr. Yoder, for both your sakes. As the cars pull away, leaving dust clouds hanging in the autumn air, Samuel and Tommy stand side by side watching them go. The first battle is over, but they both know it's just the beginning. Are you scared? Tommy asks, slipping his hand into Samuel's. Terrified, Samuel admits, but also hopeful. How about you? Tommy considers this with the seriousness that has become his trademark. I think being scared is okay if you're scared together with someone who loves you. Samuel's throat tightens with emotion. That's very wise, son. I learned it from you, Tommy says simply. As they walk back toward the house together, Samuel realizes that in trying to save Tommy, he's discovered something he thought was lost forever. His own capacity for joy, for hope, for the kind of love that makes taking risks worthwhile. The road ahead will be difficult, full of home visits and evaluations and legal proceedings, but for now, in this moment, they are together on Samuel's farm, and that's enough to build a future on. 3 weeks pass like pages turning in a well-loved book, slowly, deliberately, with each day adding another layer to the story Samuel and Tommy are writing together. The social workers come and go, clipboards in hand, documenting everything from the cleanliness of Tommy's bedroom to the contents of Samuel's pantry. But gradually, even the most skeptical officials begin to see what anyone with eyes can witness. This unlikely pair is healing each other. The transformation in Tommy is remarkable. The hollow-eyed, frightened child who cowered by Samuel's fence has been replaced by a boy who wakes each morning eager to help with farm chores. His laughter, tentative at first, now rings out across the fields as he chases chickens or tries to convince the goats to follow him around the yard. The bruises have faded from his skin, but more importantly, the fear has begun to fade from his eyes. Samuel, too, is changing. Neighbors who haven't seen him smile in 27 years now watch him teaching Tommy to milk cows, patiently showing small hands how to coax milk from patient udders. The community has embraced this development with the quiet acceptance that marks true faith. If God has brought this English child to Samuel, then Samuel was meant to care for him. But it's on a crisp November morning, exactly 1 month after Tommy's arrival, that the real test of their bond comes. Samuel is in the barn teaching Tommy the proper way to brush down Buttercup after their morning ride when he hears the sound of multiple vehicles coming up the drive. This time it's not just the familiar white CPS van, there's a police car and, more ominously, a black Mercedes sedan that speaks of expensive lawyers and serious legal proceedings. Tommy freezes, the brush still in his small hand. "Is it Uncle Rick?" he whispers, and Samuel can hear 30 years of fear compressed into those 3 words. "I don't know, son," Samuel says honestly, "but whatever it is, we'll face it together." The first person out of the Mercedes is indeed a lawyer, but not one Samuel has seen before. This is Margaret Walsh, a woman in her 50s, with steel grey hair and the kind of sharp eyes that miss nothing. Behind her emerges Rick Henderson, Tommy's uncle, looking haggard and angry, and nothing like a man who's spent a month worried about a missing child. Tommy takes one look at his uncle and bolts, not toward the house, not toward the road, but straight up into the barn's hayloft, moving with the desperate speed of prey seeking safety. "Tommy!" Rick Henderson shouts, his voice carrying an edge of violence that makes Samuel's hands clench into fists. "Get down here right now. We're going home." "He is home," Samuel says quietly, but his voice carries the kind of authority that comes from absolute conviction. Margaret Walsh steps between the 2 men. "Mr. Yoder, I'm Margaret Walsh, representing Mr. Henderson's interests. My client has completed court-ordered anger management counseling and is prepared to provide a stable home for his nephew. Tommy needs to come with us today." Samuel looks up at the loft where Tommy has disappeared into the hay bales. He can hear the boy's panicked breathing from here, can feel his terror like a physical force. "Ma'am," Samuel says, never taking his eyes off the loft, "that child is more frightened right now than any living thing should ever have to be. If your client has truly changed, why is Tommy running from him like his life depends on it?" "Children exaggerate," Rick Henderson snarls, though his eyes keep darting toward the loft. "Tommy's always been dramatic, always making up stories to get attention. He needs discipline, structure, not this, whatever this is." From the loft comes a small voice, trembling but clear. "I'm not making up stories, and I'm not going back." Margaret Walsh consults her papers. "Mr. Yoder, while I'm sure you've grown attached to Tommy, he's not your child. Henderson has legal custody, and he's demonstrated his commitment to providing proper care." "Have you seen the scars?" Samuel asks quietly. The lawyer's professional composure flickers slightly. "Children can be clumsy, they hurt themselves playing." "Those weren't play injuries," Samuel says, and his voice carries the weight of absolute truth. "Those were the marks of a man who beats a child for being hungry, for being scared, for being 7 years old." Rick Henderson's face flushes red. "You don't know what you're talking about, old man. Tommy was out of control, needed firm guidance. I did what was necessary to. You did what was evil." Samuel interrupts, and the quiet force in his voice makes everyone stop talking. "You took a child who had already lost his mother, and you taught him that love means pain, that family means fear. You nearly destroyed a beautiful soul because you were too weak to deal with your own demons." The silence stretches taut as a wire about to snap. Then from the loft comes Tommy's voice again, stronger now. "Mr. Samuel, will you come up here, please?" Samuel doesn't hesitate. He climbs the ladder to the loft, leaving the lawyers and officials below. He finds Tommy crouched behind a stack of hay bales, his face streaked with tears but his jaw set with determination. "I won't go back," Tommy says. "I'll run away again. I'll keep running until I find somewhere safe or until I die trying." Samuel's heart breaks and mends simultaneously at the fierce courage in this small boy's voice. He settles cross-legged in the hay beside Tommy. "What if you didn't have to run? What if there was a way to stay here permanently?" "How?" Tommy asks, hope and skepticism warring in his voice. "I could adopt you," Samuel says simply. "Make you my son in the eyes of the law, not just in my heart." Tommy stares at him with those wide brown eyes. "You'd really want to do that? Even though I'm not Amish? Even though I don't know how to be a good son?" Samuel reaches out and gently brushes a piece of hay from Tommy's hair. "Tommy, you've been a good son since the moment I found you by my fence. You help with chores without being asked. You're gentle with the animals. You ask thoughtful questions and listen to the answers. You make me laugh. You make me hope. You make me remember what it feels like to have a purpose beyond just surviving each day." "But what about Jacob?" Tommy asks quietly. "Won't you always miss him more than you could love me?" The question hits Samuel like a physical blow, but he recognizes the deep need behind it, this child's desperate hunger to be chosen, to be wanted, be enough. "Tommy," Samuel says, his voice thick with emotion, "Jacob will always be my first son, and I will always love him. But love doesn't have limits like that. Love grows bigger to fit whoever needs it. You're not replacing Jacob. You're completing something in me that's been broken for 30 years. Tommy throws his arms around Samuel's neck with the desperate force of a child who has finally found his safe harbor. "I love you, Dad," he whispers into Samuel's shoulder, and the word Dad hits Samuel's heart like lightning. "I love you too, son," Samuel whispers back, and means it with every fiber of his being. When they climb back down from the loft together, hand in hand, the group of officials has grown. Linda Morrison has arrived, along with Detective Santos and Judge Patricia Chen, who apparently decided this case required her direct attention. Rick Henderson takes one look at Tommy's tear-stained face, pressed against Samuel's side, and makes a tactical error. He lunges forward and grabs Tommy's arm roughly. "Enough of this nonsense. You're coming home with me right now, you ungrateful little..." Tommy cries out in pain and fear, and several things happen at once. Samuel steps protectively in front of Tommy. Judge Chen's expression turns thunderous, and Detective Santos moves her hand to her handcuffs. "Mr. Henderson," Judge Chen says with ice in her voice, "step away from that child immediately." But the damage is done. Tommy is shaking again, all the progress of the past month seemingly erased by one moment of violence. But then something remarkable happens. Instead of cowering or running, Tommy steps forward. "Your Honor," he says, his voice small but clear, "I know I'm just a kid, and maybe my opinion doesn't count for much. But Mr. Samuel saved my life. He gave me food when I was starving, a warm bed when I was cold, and kindness when I thought I'd never feel safe again. He's teaching me about horses and farming and how to be good to people. Uncle Rick taught me about fear and pain and how to hide bruises. I know which one is my real family." Judge Chen looks at this small boy who is advocating for his own future with the composure of someone 3 times his age. She looks at Samuel, whose protective love radiates from every pore. She looks at Rick Henderson, whose angry desperation speaks volumes about his true character. "Miss Henderson," she says finally, "your parental rights are hereby suspended pending a full investigation. Tommy will remain in Mr. Yoder's care while we evaluate a formal adoption petition." The words hit the autumn air like church bells ringing. Tommy looks up at Samuel with wonder and joy dawning in his face. Samuel looks down at Tommy and sees his future, not as a replacement for what he lost, but as something new and precious and entirely his own. Rick Henderson blusters and threatens legal action, but Margaret Walsh is already gathering her papers with the resigned efficiency of a lawyer who knows when a case is lost. The other officials begin making notes about paperwork and procedures and timelines, but Samuel and Tommy only have eyes for each other. In this moment, surrounded by the familiar smells of hay and horses and home, they become what they were always meant to be, father and son, not by blood or law, but by choice and love, and the mysterious workings of grace that brings lost souls together exactly when they need each other most. "Are you ready to be a Yoda?" Samuel asks Tommy quietly. "I've been ready since the night you made me soup," Tommy replies, and in the golden light of that November morning, with the community of officials bearing witness, Tommy Henderson takes the first legal step toward becoming Tommy Yoder. Beloved son, cherished child, living proof that families are built not just from DNA, but from daily acts of love and the courage to choose each other again and again. Winter settles over Lancaster County like a prayer, whispered in silence, deep, transformative, and full of the kind of peace that only comes after great storms have passed. It's been 2 months since Judge Chen's ruling, and Samuel's farmhouse has become something it hasn't been in 30 years, a true home filled with the sounds of life being lived fully. Tommy has thrived beyond anyone's expectations. The adoption paperwork moves through the courts with surprising speed, helped along by glowing reports from social workers who have witnessed what can only be called a miracle of healing. The boy who arrived half dead from fear and neglect now bounds down the stairs each morning, eager to help with chores, chattering about everything from the baby goats born last week to his plans for the garden come spring. But it's on a bitter January morning, when the world outside is wrapped in snow so white it hurts to look at, that their greatest test arrives, not from lawyers or social workers this time, but from something far more powerful and unpredictable. Tommy wakes with a fever. At first, Samuel isn't too concerned. Children get sick, and Tommy has been no exception. He's had 2 colds and a stomach bug since his arrival, each one tended with the patient care. Samuel once showed Jacob, but by afternoon, Tommy's temperature has spiked to 104 degrees, and his breathing has become labored and shallow. "Dad," Tommy whispers, the word still new enough that it makes Samuel's heart skip every time he hears it. "I don't feel good." Samuel places his hand on Tommy's burning forehead and feels fear claw at his chest, the same cold terror he felt 30 years ago when he carried Jacob's lifeless body from the burning barn. "I know, son. We're going to get you to the doctor right away." But here's where the complications of Samuel's chosen life become dangerous obstacles. The nearest hospital is 20 miles away, and Samuel doesn't drive a car. The Amish community relies on English drivers for emergencies, but the blizzard that started an hour ago has made most roads impassable. Samuel bundles Tommy in every blanket he can find and carries him to the barn, where he hitches up his strongest horse, Magnus, to the sleigh. If they can't drive to help, they'll have to find another way. The journey through the snowstorm is a nightmare of white-knuckle terror. Magnus, sensing the urgency, pushes through drifts that come up to his chest, but the wind cuts through their bundled forms like knives. Tommy drifts in and out of consciousness, mumbling words that don't make sense, and Samuel finds himself praying with the desperate intensity of a man who has already lost one son to forces beyond his control. "Please, God," he whispers into the howling wind, "don't take this boy too. Don't make me bury another child. I'll do anything, be anything, just please let him live." Halfway to town, Tommy stops responding entirely. His small body goes limp in Samuel's arms, and his breathing becomes so shallow, Samuel has to put his ear to the boy's chest to make sure his heart is still beating. That's when Samuel makes a decision that goes against every principle of his faith, every rule of the Amish way of life. He sees headlights cutting through the storm, a four-wheel drive truck struggling through the same snow that's bogging down his sleigh. Samuel stands up in the sleigh, waving his arms frantically. "Help!" he shouts into the wind. "Please, my son is dying." The truck stops, and a man in his 50s jumps out. Dr. Robert Martinez from Lancaster General Hospital, who was trying to make it home after a double shift. One look at Tommy's grey complexion and labored breathing tells him everything he needs to know. "Get him in the truck," Martinez shouts over the wind. "We need to move now." Samuel doesn't hesitate. He abandons his sleigh, his horse, everything that defines his way of life, and climbs into that truck with Tommy in his arms. As they race toward the hospital, Dr. Martinez calling ahead on his cell phone, Samuel makes another choice that would shock his community. He begins to pray that modern medicine, all the technology and treatments his faith normally shuns, will save his son's life. The emergency room at Lancaster General erupts into controlled chaos. The moment they arrive, Tommy is whisked away on a gurney, surrounded by doctors and nurses with machines and medicines that Samuel doesn't understand, but trusts with desperate hope. For 6 hours, Samuel sits in a waiting room chair, still wearing his black wool coat and plain clothes, surrounded by the beeping and humming of a world he's spent 62 years avoiding. Other families come and go, some celebrating, some grieving, all of them navigating the peculiar purgatory of hospital waiting rooms. Dr. Martinez finds him there just after midnight, still in his surgical scrubs, exhaustion written across his face. "Mr. Yoder," Martinez says, settling into the chair beside Samuel, "Tommy has pneumonia, severe pneumonia. His lungs were filling with fluid, and his body was going into septic shock." Samuel's hands clench together so tightly his knuckles go white. He's stable now. We've got him on oxygen and strong antibiotics." "But Mr. Yoder, if you had waited another hour, if you hadn't gotten him here when you did," Dr. Martinez shakes his head. "Tommy owes his life to your quick thinking." Samuel closes his eyes and feels 30 years of grief and terror wash over him like a tide. "Can I see him?" Tommy looks impossibly small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by machines that breathe for him and monitor his every heartbeat. His face is pale but peaceful, and when Samuel takes his hand, those brown eyes flutter open. "Dad?" Tommy's voice is barely a whisper through the oxygen mask. "Are you here?" "I'm here, son. I'm not going anywhere. I was scared," Tommy admits. "I dreamed I was back in that cold place, and I couldn't find you." Samuel's throat tightens with emotion. "You never have to be scared of being alone again. I promise you that." Tommy's eyes drift closed again, but his grip on Samuel's hand remains firm. Samuel settles into the chair beside the bed and prepares for what he knows will be the longest night of his life. But as the hours pass, something remarkable happens. Word spreads through the Amish community about Tommy's condition, and despite the late hour and the continuing storm, people begin to arrive at the hospital. First comes Samuel's neighbor, Isaiah Miller, who brings Samuel coffee and a clean shirt. Then comes Sarah Byler, who sits with Samuel and helps him understand what the doctors are saying. By dawn, the waiting room holds a dozen Amish families, all there to support Samuel and pray for Tommy's recovery. Samuel says Elder Joshua Stoltzfus, the community's most respected leader, "We heard what you did last night, how you got help any way you could." Samuel looks up, expecting judgment, maybe even censure for abandoning his horse and riding in a truck, for putting his faith in English medicine. Instead, Elder Stoltzfus places a weathered hand on Samuel's shoulder. "You did what a father does. You fought for your son's life with everything you had. There's no shame in that, only love." The words break something open in Samuel's chest, not breaking apart, but breaking open, like a dam giving way to let healing waters flow. For 30 years, he's carried the guilt of not being able to save Jacob, of not being fast enough, strong enough, faithful enough. But now, sitting in this hospital surrounded by his community's support, he finally understands that sometimes love means letting go of rigid rules in favor of desperate action. On the third day, Tommy's fever breaks, his breathing clears, and the doctors begin talking about sending him home within the week. But it's what Tommy says when he's finally strong enough to sit up that changes everything. "Dad," he says, his voice still rough but clear, "I heard you talking to me while I was sick. You kept telling me stories about Jacob, about how much you loved him, but you also kept saying you couldn't lose another son." Samuel nods, remembering the hours of one-sided conversations, pouring out his heart to an unconscious child. "I want you to know something," Tommy continues, his 7-year-old face serious with the weight of important thoughts. "I'm not your second son. I'm not replacing Jacob. I'm your first Tommy. And being your first Tommy is the most important job I'll ever have." The wisdom in those words, spoken by a child who has barely lived long enough to understand loss, hits Samuel like lightning. In that moment, he realizes that he's been carrying his grief wrong for 30 years. Jacob wasn't his practice run at fatherhood. Jacob was Jacob, perfect and complete and beloved exactly as he was. And Tommy isn't his second chance. Tommy is Tommy, equally perfect and complete and beloved in his own right. "You're absolutely right," Samuel whispers, his voice thick with tears he's held back for decades. "And being your dad, your first and only dad in this lifetime, is the most important job I'll ever have too." When they finally go home a week later, riding in the back of Elder Stoltzfus's buggy through snow-covered fields that sparkle like diamonds under winter sun, both Samuel and Tommy understand that something fundamental has shifted. They've faced the possibility of loss together and emerged not broken, but stronger. Their bond has been tested by fever and fear and the terrible fragility of human life, and it has proved unbreakable. "Dad," Tommy says as they turn into their driveway, "next winter, can we make sure we have a backup plan for getting to the hospital?" Samuel laughs, actually laughs, at the practical wisdom of his son. "Next winter we'll have a phone installed and an arrangement with Martinez for emergencies. Your health is more important than any rule, Tommy." "Good," Tommy says with satisfaction, "because I plan to be your son for a very long time, and I want to make sure I'm around to take care of you when you get really old." As they walk into their house together, Samuel realizes that this child has given him something he never expected to have again. A future worth planning for, worth hoping for, worth fighting for with everything he has. Sometimes the greatest tests of faith don't come in churches or through scripture. Sometimes they come at 2 a.m. in a hospital waiting room, when you have to choose between religious principle and desperate love. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you discover that the deepest faith isn't about following rules, it's about loving someone so completely that you'll risk everything to keep them safe. Spring arrives in Lancaster County like a symphony written in green, tender shoots, pushing through dark earth, apple trees exploding into clouds of white blossoms, and the air itself seeming to hum with the promise of new beginnings. It's been 6 months since Tommy first appeared by Samuel's fence, and the adoption papers are finally ready for the judge's signature. What should be the happiest day of their lives together is overshadowed by an unexpected and devastating challenge. The letter arrives on a Tuesday morning in April, delivered by a courier who seems uncomfortable with the gravity of what he's carrying. Samuel opens it at the kitchen table while Tommy feeds scraps to their new puppy, a border collie mix they've named Scout. The official letterhead makes Samuel's heart sink before he even reads the contents. "Dad, what's wrong?" Tommy asks, immediately sensing the change in atmosphere. At 8 years old now, his birthday passed quietly in February, with homemade cake and a new wooden horse Samuel carved for him. Tommy has developed an almost supernatural ability to read Samuel's moods. Samuel sets the letter down with hands that tremble slightly. "Son, we need to talk about something serious." Tommy abandons Scout and climbs onto his chair at the table, his face grave with the expression of a child who has learned that serious conversations can change everything. "Is someone trying to take me away again?" "Not exactly," Samuel says carefully. "But there's a problem with the adoption. A legal problem." The letter is from the Pennsylvania Department of Children and Family Services, and it outlines an issue that neither Samuel nor any of their lawyers anticipated. Because Samuel is single, over 60, and part of a religious community that doesn't use modern conveniences, a coalition of child advocacy groups has filed an objection to the adoption, arguing that placing Tommy permanently in this environment constitutes a form of educational and social deprivation. "What does that mean?" Tommy asks, though Samuel suspects the boy understands more than he's letting on. "It means," Samuel says, choosing his words carefully, "that some people think you'd be better off in a different kind of family. A younger family with a mother and father, people who live in the regular world with computers and television and public schools." Tommy's face goes through a series of expressions: confusion, fear, and then something Samuel has never seen there before: pure, righteous anger. "That's stupid," Tommy says with 8-year-old bluntness. "Those people don't know anything about us. They don't know that you read to me every night, or that I can milk cows and ride horses and help build barns. They don't know that I have friends here, and everyone at church loves me, and Mrs. Byler is teaching me to can vegetables for next winter." Samuel's heart swells with pride at Tommy's fierce defense of their life, but he can also see the fear underneath the anger. "Tommy, what matters most is what you... If you ever feel like you're missing out on things, if you want to try living in the regular world..." "No," Tommy interrupts with such force that Scout stops chewing and looks up alertly. "This is my home. You're my dad. I don't want the regular world." The regular world had Uncle Rick and people who didn't care if I was hungry or scared or hurt. This world has you and horses and people who know my name and make sure I'm safe. The hearing is scheduled for the following week, and Samuel spends the intervening days in a state of controlled terror that reminds him uncomfortably of those first days after Jacob's death. He tries to maintain their normal routine: morning chores, lessons in reading and arithmetic, evening prayers, but underneath it all is the knowledge that everything they've built together hangs in the balance. The night before the hearing, Tommy can't sleep. Samuel finds him sitting by his bedroom window, staring out at the moonlit fields where their horses graze peacefully. "Dad," Tommy says without turning around, "what if they decide we can't be a family?" Samuel settles beside him on the window seat, looking out at the same view. "Then we'll figure out another way to be together. I won't give up on you, Tommy. Not ever. But what if there isn't another way? What if they make me live with strangers who don't understand about quiet time and evening prayers, and why we don't need television to be happy?" The pain in Tommy's voice cuts Samuel deeper than any physical wound. "Son, look at me." Tommy turns, and in the moonlight, Samuel can see tears on his cheeks. "Do you remember what you told me in the hospital? About being my first Tommy, not my second Jacob?" Tommy nods. "Well, you're also my miracle, Tommy. For 30 years I lived in this house alone, convinced that God had forgotten about me, that my chance at having a family was over forever. Then you appeared by my fence like an answer to prayers I was afraid to pray. If God brought us together once, he can keep us together. I have to believe that. The courtroom the next morning is packed beyond capacity. On one side sit the advocates for Tommy's removal, social workers, child psychologists, representatives from educational reform groups, all armed with statistics about socialization deficits and limited opportunities in isolated religious communities. On the other side sits the entire Amish community of Lancaster County, or at least it feels that way. Samuel has never seen so many of his neighbors in one place outside of a barn raiser. Judge Chen presides again, and her expression gives nothing away as she listens to hours of testimony about what constitutes the best interests of a child. Expert witnesses debate the psychological impact of limited technology exposure, the educational adequacy of one-room schoolhouses, the social development implications of religious insularity. But it's when Dr. Sarah Patterson, a child psychologist from Philadelphia, takes the stand that the real battle begins. Your Honor, Dr. Patterson says, consulting her thick file, while I'm sure Miss Yoder means well, the fact remains that placing Tommy permanently in this environment severely limits his future opportunities. No exposure to modern technology, no preparation for higher education, no interaction with diverse populations. These are significant disadvantages in today's world. Samuel's lawyer, a quietly competent woman named Rebecca Foster, stands for cross-examination. Dr. Patterson, have you ever met Tommy Yoder? Well, no, but I've reviewed his case files extensively. Have you visited the Yoder farm? Observed Tommy's daily routine? Spoken with his teachers or community members about his development? Dr. Patterson shifts uncomfortably. That wasn't deemed necessary for this evaluation. So your expert opinion about what's best for Tommy is based entirely on theoretical assumptions about Irish life, not on any actual knowledge of Tommy's specific situation. I object, calls the opposing counsel, but Judge Chen waves him off. Answer the question, Dr. Patterson. My recommendations are based on established research about child development in isolated religious communities. Dr. Patterson says defensively, I see. And are you aware that Tommy Yoder speaks 3 languages? English, Pennsylvania Dutch, and conversational Spanish he learned from a neighbor. That he can solve complex mathematical problems related to farming and construction. That he's read over 200 books in the past 6 months. That he's learning carpentry, animal husbandry, and sustainable agriculture skills that will be increasingly valuable in our changing world. Dr. Patterson has no answer for this, but the most powerful testimony comes from an unexpected source. Judge Chen calls Tommy to the stand. Tommy, she says gently, you're only 8 years old, so I want you to know that whatever you say here today won't get anyone in trouble. I just want to understand how you feel about your life with Mr. Yoder. Tommy stands up straight in the witness box, looking impossibly small but determined. Your Honor, may I ask you a question first? Judge Chen raises her eyebrows but nods. Go ahead. What do you think makes a good childhood? The question hangs in the air like a challenge. Judge Chen considers it seriously. I suppose feeling safe, being loved, having opportunities to learn and grow, being prepared for adult life. Tommy nods sagely. Before I came to live with my dad, I lived in the regular world. I had video games and a television and went to a public school, but I was scared all the time and hungry most of the time, and nobody cared if I learned anything or not. Nobody read me bedtime stories, or taught me how to take care of animals, or showed me how to build things with my hands. He pauses, looking directly at Dr. Patterson. The lady over there says I'm missing out on opportunities, but she doesn't know what my opportunities are. Last week, I helped deliver a calf. I saved its life because I knew what to do when it couldn't breathe. Next month, I'm going to help build a barn for a family whose house burned down, and I'll learn about architecture and engineering and working together to solve problems. Tommy's voice gains strength as he continues. She says I don't interact with diverse populations, But in our church district we have families from Germany and Switzerland and Mexico, and we all take care of each other no matter where we came from or what language we spoke first. She says, I'm not prepared for higher education, but my dad has taught me that the highest education is learning how to be kind and useful and faithful. The courtroom is absolutely silent as this 8-year-old delivers what amounts to a philosophical argument for the value of his chosen life. Your Honor, Tommy concludes, I know I'm just a kid, and maybe I don't understand all the grown-up things about what's supposed to be best for me, but I know what love feels like, and I know what safety feels like, and I know what it feels like to wake up every morning excited about the day ahead, instead of scared about what might happen. If that's not a good childhood, then I don't know what is. Judge Chen is quiet for a long moment after Tommy finishes speaking. Finally she says, Tommy, is there anything else you'd like to tell the court? Tommy looks over at Samuel, who nods encouragingly. Yes, Your Honor, I want everyone to know that Samuel Yoder saved my life. Not just from Uncle Rick, but from thinking that nobody could ever really want me. He showed me that families aren't about blood or rules or having the right kind of house. They're about choosing to love someone every single day, even when it's hard, even when other people don't understand. His voice drops to a whisper that somehow carries to every corner of the courtroom. He chose me, and I chose him back. We're a real family, and we deserve to stay together. When Tommy steps down from the witness stand, there isn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even Dr. Patterson is wiping her glasses and clearing her throat. Judge Chen calls for a brief recess, and when she returns, her decision is swift and definitive. In the matter of the adoption petition for Thomas Henderson, soon to be Thomas Yoder, she begins, this court has considered extensive testimony about what constitutes the best interests of a child. We've heard from experts about educational standards, socialization requirements, and developmental benchmarks. Samuel holds his breath, Tommy's hand gripped tightly in his own. But we've also heard from the most important expert of all, Tommy himself, and what I see before me is a child who has been transformed by love, who has found his place in the world, who has grown from a frightened, abused boy into a confident, articulate young man with a strong sense of identity and belonging. Judge Chen looks directly at Tommy and Samuel. Mr. Yoder, you have provided Tommy with something that cannot be measured by any psychological assessment or educational rubric: unconditional love, unwavering stability, and a sense of purpose. Tommy, you have shown remarkable wisdom in recognizing and defending the value of the life you've chosen. She picks up her gavel. The adoption petition is hereby granted. Thomas Henderson is now legally Thomas Yoder, son of Samuel Yoder, with all the rights and privileges thereof. The courtroom erupts in celebration. Amish families who never show emotion in public are hugging and crying and praising God. Samuel sweeps Tommy into his arms, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. We did it, Dad, Tommy whispers into Samuel's ear. We're really a family now. We were always a family, son, Samuel whispers back. Now we just have the papers to prove it. As they walk out of the courthouse together, surrounded by their community and followed by a gaggle of reporters who want to understand this story that has captured hearts across the county, Samuel reflects on the journey that brought them to this moment. A year ago, he was a man waiting to die, living in the shadow of old grief. Today, he's a father, with a son to raise, a future to plan for, and a heart full of hope. Sometimes the most important victories aren't won on battlefields or in boardrooms. Sometimes they're won in courtrooms, where love is put on trial and emerges triumphant, where a child's wisdom shames adult assumptions, and where two souls who needed each other are finally, officially, permanently allowed to be what they always were: family. 1 year later, on a golden October evening that mirrors the night when everything began, Samuel Yoder stands by his fence line watching his son Tommy help their neighbor's children gather the last pumpkins of the harvest. The boy who once cowered in these same tall grasses now laughs freely as he chases 9-year-old Sarah Miller around the pumpkin patch, both of them orange with dirt and glowing with the particular happiness that comes from a day spent working hard in the fresh air. Samuel allows himself a moment of pure gratitude as he watches Tommy, his son, his miracle. Into 5-year-old Benjamin Stoltz views the proper way to check if a pumpkin is ready for picking. The patience in Tommy's voice, the gentle way he guides the smaller boy's hands, reminds Samuel so powerfully of Jacob that for a moment he can almost feel both his sons present in the fading light. But this isn't the sharp pain of loss that once would have driven Samuel back to the empty farmhouse to nurse his grief in solitude. This is something different, a bittersweet recognition that love doesn't end when life does, that the capacity for fatherhood Jacob awakened in him 31 years ago has found its perfect expression in caring for Tommy. "Dad," Tommy calls out, waving a particularly large pumpkin over his head. "Look at this one. It's perfect for the jack-o'-lantern contest at the Harvest Festival." Samuel walks over to admire the pumpkin, noting with a father's pride how Tommy has grown in the past year. He's taller now, still lean but no longer thin, with calluses on his hands from honest work and a tan from hours spent in the sun. More importantly, the shadows have completely disappeared from his eyes, replaced by the clear gaze of a child who has never doubted that he is loved and wanted. "That's a fine pumpkin indeed," Samuel agrees, helping Tommy hoist it into the wagon. "Your carving skills have improved greatly this year. I think we might have a winner." As the other children head home with their families, Tommy and Samuel work together to load their wagon with the pumpkins they'll sell at the farmer's market tomorrow. It's a comfortable rhythm they've developed over the months, working side by side with the easy companionship of two people who understand each other completely. "Dad," Tommy says as they secure the last pumpkin, "Mrs. Foster stopped by the schoolhouse today." Samuel looks up from tying down the wagon cover. Rebecca Foster, their lawyer, has become something of a friend over the past year, checking in occasionally to see how they're adjusting to their new legal status as father and son. "Oh? What did she have to say?" Tommy grins. "She brought someone with her. A reporter from that big newspaper in Philadelphia. They want to write a story about us for something called a human interest feature." Samuel groans good-naturedly. Ever since the adoption hearing, they've been contacted periodically by journalists wanting to tell their story. Most of the attention has died down, but occasionally someone discovers their case and wants to explore what they see as an unusual family arrangement. "What did you tell her?" "I told her the same thing I always tell reporters," Tommy says with the wisdom of a child who has learned to protect his privacy. "That we're just a regular family who happens to live on a farm. Nothing special or unusual about it." Samuel smiles at this. In the year since the adoption was finalized, Tommy has developed a diplomatic way of handling the outside world's curiosity about their life. He's polite but firm about maintaining their privacy, understanding instinctively that their happiness doesn't need to be performed for strangers. As they walk toward the house together, Tommy chattering about his day at school and his plans for tomorrow's market, Samuel reflects on all the ways their life has settled into something beautifully ordinary. Tommy helps with morning and evening chores without being asked. He does his schoolwork diligently, reads voraciously, and has developed a particular talent for woodworking that reminds Samuel daily of his own father's skilled hands. But it's the small moments that mean the most. The way Tommy always saves the last bite of his dessert for Samuel to try, how he still occasionally crawls into Samuel's bed after a nightmare, the absolute trust in his voice, when he asks Dad what do you think about before sharing his deepest thoughts and concerns. At dinner that evening, as they share a meal of pot roast and vegetables from their own garden, Tommy brings up a subject that has been on his mind lately. "Dad, I've been thinking about something important, and I want to know what you think." Samuel sets down his fork, recognizing the tone Tommy uses when he has something serious to discuss. "I'm listening. I want to be baptized. The words land in the quiet kitchen like stones dropped in still water. Samuel has been expecting this conversation for months, watching Tommy participate more fully in church services, asking increasingly thoughtful questions about faith and community, and what it means to choose the Amish way of life. "Tell me about why this is important to you," Samuel says carefully. Tommy pushes peas around his plate as he organizes his thoughts. "Well, I've been thinking about what it means to really belong somewhere. I know I'm your son now, legally and everything, and I know our community has accepted me, but I want to make my own choice about being Amish. The same way I made my own choice about being your son." Samuel's heart swells with pride at the mature way Tommy is thinking about such a significant decision. "You know that baptism is a serious commitment, not just to me or to our community, but to God and to a way of life that will set you apart from the world you were born into." "I know," Tommy says solemnly. "That's why I want to do it. The world I was born into hurt me and taught me that I didn't matter. This world, our world, taught me that I'm valuable and loved, and that I have something important to contribute. Why would I ever want to go back?" Samuel reaches across the table and takes Tommy's hand. "Son, you don't have to decide this now. Traditionally, young people don't make this choice until they're teenagers, after they've had time to experience both worlds and truly understand what they're choosing. But I have experienced both worlds," Tommy says with conviction. "I lived in the English world for 7 years, and I've lived in our world for almost 2 years. I know which one made me into the person I want to be." That night, after Tommy has gone to bed, Samuel sits alone in his kitchen with a cup of tea and thinks about the extraordinary journey that has brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, he was a man resigned to living out his days in solitude, maintaining his faith through duty rather than joy. Tonight, he's the father of a boy who wants to choose Samuel's way of life, not because he was born to it, but because he's discovered it's where his heart belongs. The next morning brings the first frost of the season, coating everything in silver crystal that sparkles like scattered diamonds in the early light. Samuel wakes to find Tommy already up and dressed, eager to help load their pumpkins for the farmer's market. "Dad," Tommy says as they hitch Magnus to the wagon, "I had the most wonderful dream last night. Tell me about it. I dreamed I was grown up, and I had a farm of my own right next to yours. And I had a family, a wife and children, and they were all working in the fields together. But the best part was that you were there too, teaching my children the same things you taught me." Samuel's throat tightens with emotion at the picture Tommy paints. "That sounds like a beautiful dream, son. It wasn't just a dream, though," Tommy continues, his voice thoughtful. "It felt like a promise, like God was showing me what my life could look like if I keep making good choices." The farmer's market in Lancaster is bustling with the energy of harvest seasons. Samuel and Tommy set up their stand next to their friends and neighbors, arranging pumpkins and late vegetables in displays that catch the morning light. Tommy has become quite the salesman over the past year, charming customers with his knowledge of farming and his genuine enthusiasm for their produce. But it's mid-morning when something extraordinary happens. A woman approaches their stand with 2 young children in tow, and Samuel recognizes her immediately. It's Dr. Sarah Patterson, the child psychologist who testified against their adoption a year ago. Tommy recognizes her too, and Samuel watches his son's face carefully for any sign of distress. Instead, Tommy's expression shows only polite curiosity. "Dr. Patterson," Tommy says with the good manners Samuel has taught him, "would you like to buy some pumpkins?" Dr. Patterson looks embarrassed but determined. "Actually, Tommy, I came here to apologize to you and your father." Samuel raises his eyebrows. "Oh? After the hearing last year, I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, Tommy. About what makes a good childhood. About feeling safe and loved and excited about each day. So I did something I should have done before. I researched Amish education and community life more thoroughly." She pauses, looking directly at Tommy. "I also followed up on your progress through your school and community. Your teacher sent me some of your writing, and your neighbors told me about your involvement in community projects." "And?" Tommy asks, though his tone is curious rather than defensive. And I realized I was completely wrong. Not just about Amish life in general, but about what you specifically needed to thrive. Dr. Patterson's voice carries genuine regret. You were right when you said I didn't know anything about you. I was so focused on theoretical models that I ignored the actual evidence right in front of me. A child who had been transformed by love and community and purpose. Tommy considers this with the seriousness he brings to all important conversations. Dr. Patterson, I'm not angry at you. You were trying to do what you thought was best for me, even though you were wrong. That's what grown-ups do sometimes. They make mistakes because they care. The grace in Tommy's response leaves Dr. Patterson speechless for a moment. Finally, she says, Tommy, would it be all right if I included your story in some research I'm doing about alternative approaches to child welfare? I think other people need to understand what I learned from you. Tommy looks at Samuel, who nods encouragingly. As long as you tell the truth about what makes a good family, Tommy says. Not just what the books say, but what actually works. After Dr. Patterson leaves with her pumpkins and a promise to send them copies of her research, Tommy turns to Samuel with a thoughtful expression. Dad, do you think God sometimes uses our hardest experiences to teach other people important lessons? Samuel is continually amazed by the depth of his son's thinking. What do you mean? Well, maybe Uncle Rick hurt me and I ended up with you not just so we could be a family, but so people like Dr. Patterson could learn that love comes in different shapes than they expected. Maybe our story helps other kids find families too. The wisdom in Tommy's observation takes Samuel's breath away. I think you might be right, son. I think God has a way of bringing beautiful things out of terrible circumstances. As the day progresses and they sell the last of their pumpkins, Samuel watches Tommy interact with customers, neighbors and friends, with the confident ease of a child who knows exactly where he belongs. This boy who once flinched at loud voices now lives freely with the teenagers from their church district. The child who once went days without food now shares his lunch with anyone who looks hungry. But it's late afternoon, as they're packing up their empty stand, when the moment Samuel will remember for the rest of his life occurs. Tommy is loading the last crates into their wagon when he pauses and looks around the market square, at the Amish families heading home to evening chores, at the English customers heading back to their cars, at the mix of old and new, simple and complex, traditional and modern that makes up their corner of Pennsylvania. Dad, Tommy says quietly, I want you to know something important. What's that, son? Tommy takes Samuel's weathered hand in his still small one and looks up with those brown eyes that have seen too much sorrow but have learned to hope again. I know that lots of kids dream about finding their real family someday, about discovering they're actually a prince or that their birth parents are coming back for them. But I don't have those dreams anymore. Samuel's heart clenches, wondering if Tommy is about to reveal some hidden sadness or regret. I don't have those dreams, Tommy continues, because I already found my real family. You're my real dad. This is my real home, and these are my real people. Not because of blood or law or anything like that, but because this is where I chose to grow my heart. The words hit Samuel with the force of a revelation. In that moment, standing in the Lancaster farmers' market, surrounded by the simple abundance of their shared life, Samuel finally understands something that has eluded him for 31 years. Families aren't just born, they're built from daily acts of love, from choosing each other again and again, from weathering storms together and celebrating victories as one. Jacob was his son by birth, precious and beloved and irreplaceable. Tommy is his son by choice, equally precious, equally beloved, equally irreplaceable. Both relationships are perfect and complete in their own way. Neither diminishes the other. Love doesn't have limits or quotas. It simply expands to embrace whoever needs it most. Tommy, Samuel says, his voice thick with 3 decades of grief finally transformed into gratitude. You are the most real thing in my life. You and Jacob both. My sons, my blessings, my proof that God's love is bigger than any sorrow. As they climb into the wagon for the ride home, Tommy snuggles against Samuel's side with the unconscious trust of a child who has never doubted that he is safe. "Dad, will you tell me a story about Jacob on the way home?" "Of course. Which story would you like to hear?" "The one about how he would have loved having a little brother." Samuel smiles as he guides Magnus onto the road that leads home. "That's a good story. It starts like this. Jacob always wanted a brother to teach things to. Someone who would listen to his stories and laugh at his jokes, and help him build forts in the hayloft." As Samuel's voice weaves the story of two boys who never met, but are forever connected by their father's love, Tommy's breathing grows slow and peaceful. The sun sets behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, and ahead waits their farmhouse with lamplight glowing warm in the windows. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new joys, new opportunities to choose each other all over again. Tommy will continue growing into the remarkable young man Samuel already sees in him. There will be school programs and harvest festivals, community barn raisings, and quiet evenings by the fire. There will be scraped knees to bandage and homework to supervise, and teenage years to navigate together. But tonight, as they travel the familiar road home, Samuel Yoder understands something profound about the nature of love and loss, and second chances. Sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the worst possible circumstance. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the deepest sorrows. And sometimes, when we think our capacity for joy has been buried forever, God places a small hand in ours and teaches us that our hearts can always grow larger than our grief. The boy who said, "Stay with me," to the lost child has found something neither of them was looking for. Not just healing, but wholeness. Not just survival, but a reason to thrive. Not just a family, but a legacy of love that will echo through generations yet to come. As they turn into their driveway past the fence where it all began, Samuel and Tommy Yoder head home together, father and son by the most powerful force in the universe. The choice to love completely, unconditionally, and forever. In the end, that's all any family really is. Two or more people who decide that loving each other is worth whatever it costs. Samuel and Tommy have paid that price willingly, joyfully, and they've discovered that the return on such an investment is beyond measure. They are home. They are family. They are enough. 5 years later, at Tommy's baptism ceremony on a perfect spring morning, Samuel watches his 13-year-old son make his public commitment to the faith and community that has shaped them both. As Tommy emerges from the water, his face radiant with joy and certainty, Samuel feels Jacob's presence like a benediction, as if his first son is welcoming his chosen brother into the eternal family that transcends earthly understanding. After the ceremony, as the community gathers for the celebration meal, Tommy finds Samuel standing quietly by the fence where their story began. "Dad," Tommy says, now tall enough to look Samuel in the eye, "I know you're thinking about Jacob today." Samuel nods, no longer afraid of sharing his grief with his son. "I was thinking how proud he would be of his little brother today." Tommy smiles. "I think he is proud. I think he's been watching over both of us this whole time, making sure we found each other when we needed to." Samuel looks at this young man who has brought his heart back to life, who has taught him that love multiplies rather than divides, who has shown him that some of life's greatest gifts come wrapped in its deepest sorrows. "Thank you, son," Samuel says simply. "For what?" "For staying with me, for choosing me back, for teaching an old man that his heart could learn to hope again." Tommy grins and throws his arms around Samuel in the unself-conscious embrace of a child who has never doubted that he is loved. "Thank you for finding me by your fence that night and giving me the one thing I needed most." "What was that?" "A dad who would never let me go." As they walk back toward the celebration together, their community surrounding them with love and acceptance, Samuel Yoder knows that his story has found its perfect ending, not in the sorrow that once defined him, but in the joy that redeemed it. Sometimes the most important words in any language are the simplest ones, "Stay with me," and sometimes when we're brave enough to say them and wise enough to mean them, they become the foundation of miracle.